The silence in room 340, one of the Rayburn House office building, was deafening. FBI Director Kash Patel stood frozen before the witness stand, his mask of control finally cracked. For the first time, the man known for his ruthlessness seemed genuinely shaken. Across from him, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett held a manila folder, and everyone knew it contained something that would change the game. But to understand this moment, one had to go back 18 hours earlier, in the hallways of the FBI's Jade Gaho building, where an unprecedented political scandal was brewing. It was 11:47 p.m. on September 16th when Special Agent Maria Santos made a discovery that would rock Washington. Santos, a 15-year veteran in the Public Corruption Unit, was working late on seemingly ordinary cases when she stumbled upon something that chilled her blood: hidden communications in a classified database, normally reserved for the director and his inner circle. The files revealed systematic manipulations of crime statistics, fabricated arrests, and cover-ups of investigation failures. But the most disturbing part was that Patel orchestrated it all personally. For months, he had boasted during hearings and press conferences about impressive numbers: 23,000 violent criminals arrested, 1,500 child predators behind bars, 300 human trafficking networks dismantled. Successes that were almost too perfect because they were entirely fabricated. Internal communications showed Patel ordering his team to inflate the numbers to impress Congress, counting old arrests or those made by local forces as if they were his own achievements. Santos knew she couldn't act alone. Patel was one of the most powerful men in the country, capable of destroying anyone who challenged him. She needed a brave and influential person to expose the truth: Jasmine Crockett. At 6:23 a.m. on September 17th, Santos contacted Crockett via a secure phone. "You need to see something before the hearing. It concerns the director's testimony and could save lives." Crockett, known for her boldness, did not hesitate. 2 hours later, she was face to face with Santos, examining the most damning evidence of federal corruption she had ever seen. Listening to Santos, Crockett immediately grasped the magnitude of the scandal. Every document, every phone recording, every internal memo revealed the extent of the manipulation orchestrated by Patel. The impressive figures he displayed during hearings were not just exaggerated, they were systematically falsified. Previous arrests or those made by local police were counted as his successes. Investigations that had been closed before his tenure were claimed as his own victories. The most dramatic case involved the murder of Charlie Kirk, which Patel presented as solved by the FBI in 33 hours, thanks to their exemplary work. In reality, the suspect had turned himself into local police, and the FBI had no involvement in the identification or arrest. Crockett felt a mix of anger and determination. This was not just about lies regarding the agency's success, but a betrayal of justice itself. Santos also revealed that the bomb threats against historically black universities, on which Patel claimed progress, remained unresolved, and that half of the agents had been reassigned to politically motivated investigations against journalists and activists. Crockett realized that this manipulation was not just about the director's image. It was an attack on the integrity of the FBI and public safety. For 4 hours, she reviewed every piece of evidence provided by Santos, from emails to recordings, each piece confirming this systematic deception. When she left the meeting, Crockett knew that the House Judiciary Committee hearing was going to surpass anything she had ever experienced. She was not just going to question Patel, she was going to expose him. Meanwhile, Patel was preparing for what he believed to be a routine hearing. His team had briefed him on possible questions, and he was confident, armed with figures and statistics he thought were irrefutable. He had no idea that, on the other side of the city, Crockett was having explosive documents copied, potentially comparable to the Pentagon Papers, proving that the director had lied to Congress and the American people. Every falsified report, every manipulated figure, every internal communication was about to be revealed. On the morning of September 17th, FBI Director Kash Patel entered room 340, one of the Rayburn House office building, self-assured and confident. He expected a routine hearing where his impressive numbers, 23,000 violent criminals arrested, 1,500 child predators behind bars, 300 human trafficking networks dismantled, would serve as a shield against any criticism. His team had briefed him on every possible question, his talking points were perfectly memorized, and his strategy relied on calmness, accuracy, and an overwhelming presentation of data. What he did not know was that Jasmine Crockett, armed with documents provided by Maria Santos, was ready to unveil the truth. As soon as the hearing began, the exchanges seemed routine. Committee Chairman Jim Jordan praised Patel's successes, and Republican members asked favorable questions. But everything changed when Crockett took the floor. Her voice, firm and precise, immediately captured everyone's attention. She addressed the figures presented by Patel and asked if he was aware of the FBI internal file number 2025 DC 7842. The director, prepared for all sorts of personal and political attacks, did not expect a specific file number to be mentioned. Crockett revealed that this file contained his internal communications ordering the manipulation of statistics for Congress. The room fell silent, stunned. Patel tried to deny it, but Crockett read emails dated July 15th and 18th, where he explicitly asked his team to inflate the numbers, even if it meant claiming arrests made before his tenure or by other agencies. The weight of the evidence was overwhelming. Cameras captured every micro-expression on Patel's face, which turned pale, unable to respond, surrounded by his colleagues who seemed to want to disappear. Crockett did not stop there. She addressed the Charlie Kirk case, revealing that the FBI had played no role in resolving the matter. The director's lies were laid bare, and each methodical question from Crockett reinforced the certainty that Patel's career had just taken a nosedive. The room was engulfed in a silent chaos. Shocked journalists, Republicans trying to distance themselves, and Democrats watching with contained excitement. After the initial shock of the hearing, Crockett did not settle for reading just one or two emails. She laid out the entirety of the evidence compiled by Maria Santos, 17 additional emails, 12 phone recordings, and 43 pages of internal memos corroborating the manipulations. Each document methodically exposed Patel's explicit orders to falsify statistics and claim arrests made by other agencies or prior to his tenure. The immediate impact was devastating. The Republican members present, who had defended Patel all morning, were now frozen, unable to look away. The Democrats, on the other hand, bit their lips to avoid showing too openly their satisfaction. Every word spoken by Crockett reinforced the impression of Patel's total control over the information used to serve his personal political ambitions. The entire room seemed suspended in time, witnessing the live destruction of a career built on lies. Patel's aides, the deputy directors of the FBI, and even the committee chairman, Jim Jordan, realized they had been duped and that their own reputations were at stake. The use of the FBI's internal communications showed that Patel had not only exaggerated his successes, but had established a system of institutional deception. Crockett also demonstrated the extent of the manipulations in sensitive files, including threats to historically black universities and the Charlie Kirk case, exposing the use of FBI resources for political purposes rather than to protect the public. Patel's private recordings revealed his discussions with his advisors on how to control information and manipulate Congress. The scope and precision of the investigation conducted by Crockett and Santos transformed a simple hearing into a national scandal, demonstrating how power and arrogance can corrupt an institution. As Crockett progressed through his presentation, Patel lost all control. His attempts at justification failed against the written and audio evidence that left no room for doubt. When confronted with a Charlie Kirk case, he was unable to deny the truth. The FBI had played no role in the arrest of the suspect. The verbal admission and the reading of his own emails before Congress marked the total collapse of his credibility. His imposing posture vanished, replaced by the pallor and anxiety of a man trapped in his lies. Journalists captured every reaction, every micro-expression, broadcasting live the downfall of one of the highest law enforcement officials in the United States. The hearing turned into a public humiliation. The revelation of the falsification of 23,000 arrests, the arrests of child predators, and interventions in human trafficking networks showed that Patel had manipulated the perception of the public and Congress for months. His once loyal assistants were now witnesses to his downfall, some deciding to cooperate to preserve their own careers. Crockett gave Patel no respite, asking question after question, demonstrating the system of deception in place and exposing the extent of corruption within the FBI's leadership. The hearing concluded, and the consequences were immediate. Calls for Patel's resignation came from all sides. Both Republicans and Democrats demanded investigations into his manipulation of statistics. FBI agents, long silent witnesses to the falsification, were encouraged by Crockett's courage to expose the fraudulent practices. Threats, internal pressures, and the code of silence were shattered. Maria Santos, the whistleblower, received both praise and threats, necessitating close protection. The magnitude of the scandal revealed that data manipulation was not isolated. Dozens of FBI officials were involved or had turned a blind eye, creating a culture of institutional deceit. The presidential administration was also shaken, with a direct call from the White House to Patel, demonstrating the political scale of the scandal. The public revelation of the scandal caused an earthquake within the FBI. Agents at all levels began to share their experiences, revealing an environment where statistical manipulation and report falsification were the norm rather than the exception. Trust among colleagues had been severely eroded, and entire careers were called into question. The morale of the troops, already fragile after years of political and media pressure, plummeted to historically low levels. The most senior agents, who had believed they could protect the integrity of the agency despite the abuses, were dismayed to see how their warnings had been ignored. Junior staff, who had just joined the FBI with hopes of serving justice, found themselves confronted with the harsh reality of an institution compromised by the greed and personal ambition of its director. Maria Santos, whose decision to disclose the evidence had triggered the scandal, became a heroic yet controversial figure. Some colleagues viewed her as a traitor to the organization, while others saw her as a lifeline for the FBI's credibility. Calls for reforming internal practices multiplied. The scandal had demonstrated that internal checks and transparency were insufficient to prevent such abuses. Heated debates arose on how to strengthen control mechanisms, including the implementation of independent audits and external oversight of statistics reported to Congress. The atmosphere within the FBI quickly became a mix of distrust, fear, and hope for renewal. Some agents were encouraged to testify before parliamentary committees to share evidence of manipulations, while others, terrified of potential reprisals, hesitated to speak out. The scandal also revealed the political reach of the agency, with Patel having used his statistics to influence elections and shape public opinion. Institutional integrity was put to the test, and the consequences far exceeded Patel's career. The FBI, as an institution, faced deep introspection, and the need to restore trust with the public and Congress became imperative. In the days that followed, the Department of Justice announced the opening of a comprehensive investigation into the FBI's statistical practices and reporting. A special prosecutor was appointed to examine evidence of perjury, fraud, and obstruction of justice. The scope of the investigation extended beyond Patel, targeting all officials who participated in or covered up the manipulations. Hundreds of emails, recordings, and internal memos were analyzed, revealing an institutionalized system of deception used to influence Congress and public perception. Agents who had long observed the abuses in silence were encouraged to testify, while new protections for whistleblowers were put in place. Congress also established a special commission to examine how federal agencies provided statistics and reports to lawmakers, requiring that all data be verified by independent auditors before being communicated. This initiative aimed to prevent similar manipulations from occurring in the future and to restore public trust. Meanwhile, American and international media continued to follow every development, exposing the abusive practices and provoking a global reaction. Foreign allies, particularly in Europe, demanded assurances regarding the reliability of data and the FBI's transparency in joint investigations, as the United States' reputation for security cooperation had been seriously compromised. Within the country, the public became aware of the extent of the deception. Political criticism multiplied, and the pressure for legislative reforms rapidly increased. Proposals were made to establish stronger controls over all federal agencies, with transparent and verifiable reporting, and to protect honest officials who expose abuses of power. The legislation proposed by Crockett, the Federal Accountability and Transparency Act, gained bipartisan support, promising to transform the way federal data is collected, analyzed, and communicated. Past scandals seemed less severe in light of the complexity and scale of the deception orchestrated by Patel. This period marked the beginning of a major reassessment of accountability within the government. The scandal had a profound impact on the internal culture of the FBI and on the morale of its agents. Field professionals, many of whom had dedicated decades to protecting the public, had to face the painful reality that they had been used to serve political interests rather than justice. Agents began to question not only the directives of their superiors, but also their own beliefs about the integrity of the agency. Testimonies that emerged revealed that teams had been systematically pressured to falsify reports, inflate statistics, and claim credit for investigations conducted by other institutions. Agents from sensitive units, such as crimes against children and domestic terrorism, expressed a deep sense of betrayal, realizing that their efforts had been manipulated for political gain. Maria Santos, although hailed as a heroine, became the target of internal attacks and threats of retaliation, demonstrating the intense conflict between institutional loyalty and moral responsibility. Agents were forced to navigate a highly politicized environment, where the fear of retaliation coexisted with the urgent need to restore the agency's credibility. The scandal also sparked internal debates about the necessity for systemic reform and increased transparency to ensure the long-term protection of the FBI's integrity. Older agents, who had tolerated the status quo, became aware that silence in the face of abuse had contributed to the degradation of the institution. Younger recruits, on the other hand, were motivated to demand stricter ethical standards and to support independent oversight mechanisms. The public revelation mobilized a broad movement within the agency to rebuild a culture centered on truth and justice, reaffirming the FBI's fundamental role as a trusted institution. Internal investigations also revealed that some abusive practices had been rooted in decades of rigid hierarchical culture, and that only courageous leadership could reverse the trend. Thus, the scandal demonstrated that accountability and transparency were essential to maintaining trust between agents and the public they serve. The Patel'S scandal marked a turning point in the history of the FBI and in the perception of government accountability in the United States. Jasmine Crockett, who courageously exposed the systemic deception, became a national symbol of integrity and civic vigilance. Her actions demonstrated that, Even in the face of extremely influential power figures, the truth could prevail when supported by preparation, determination, and justice. Patel's resignation and the subsequent investigations led to major structural reforms: the introduction of independent audits of federal statistics, the establishment of more secure reporting mechanisms for agents, and a reevaluation of the internal culture of the FBI. The impacts were also international, as foreign partners had to reassess the reliability of American information, highlighting that national integrity relies on transparent and accountable institutions. Publicly, the scandal awakened a collective awareness of the importance of democratic oversight and the role of whistleblowers in protecting justice. Young agents were inspired to prioritize ethics over blind loyalty, and the agency slowly began to rebuild its reputation. Crockett continued her legislative efforts to ensure that similar manipulations could not occur again, with the Federal Accountability and Transparency Act serving as the foundation for a new standard of accountability. The intense media coverage also helped raise public awareness of the complexities of FBI operations, as well as the vulnerability of institutions to corrupt leaders. Ultimately, this case demonstrated that a single individual armed with courage and solid evidence could provoke historic changes, reminding us that democracy depends on vigilant citizens and institutional transparency. The Patel scandal, while destructive to a career, became a catalyst for major reforms and a lasting example of the power of truth in the face of corruption. The historical lesson was clear: without integrity, no institution can claim to serve the people, and those who dare to defend the truth become the true guardians of democracy.